Hi, I'm Doug Draper with Acme Distribution and the Denver Transportation Club, and I'm pleased to present our series, Supply Chain and Logistics, the Storytellers. This series is brought to you by Cap Logistics. Cap Logistics are experts in offering you customized solutions for all of your transportation needs, so please visit caplogistics.com today. So I'm excited about today's topic and obviously our storyteller and guest. We're going to talk a little bit about the logistics of franchising, specifically to food, and how we get the logistics and supply chain of food in a franchise environment with a restaurant. And a friend of mine is kind enough to join us today, Joe Gordon with Teriyaki Madness. So Joe, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me, Doug. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it'll be great. So before we jump into our topic, we always like to learn a little bit about our guests. So talk to us. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I've been in supply chain and logistics for about 25 years. I started my career in CPG, heavy manufacturing at Kimberly-Clark in their logistics management training program 25 years ago. I worked for another large CPG company. And then I've been planted in the food business, mostly in restaurants for the past 20 years or so in supply chain. A couple of the companies that I've worked for the big guys, like I worked for Wendy's for several years in supply chain logistics, and I had a great experience at Noodles & Company. I actually worked and sat next to the founder and worked there all the way through several acquisitions and up until they went public and had more than 500 restaurants. So that was a lot of fun. Right now, I've decided to go even smaller, and I'm with this very exciting concept. It's a fast casual Asian concept based in Denver called Teriyaki Madness. We have almost 50.
Yeah, tell us more about Teriyaki Madness.
I'd love to. I'm excited. We have almost 50 locations in 17 states right now. We think this year we're going to grow 100%, so close to 100 by the time we close out the year, and we're also expanding in Mexico and Canada.
Oh, nice.
So we'll be building several locations in both of those countries. Today we have one location off of Arapahoe and I-25, and we'll be opening a location in Applewood on the west side in the next couple of weeks. 2 to 3 more in Denver this year, and I would encourage everybody to go and try it. It's delicious, it's affordable, fast, and fresh, so it's a very exciting concept to be a part of.
Yeah, that could be a crowded space, and there's not many fast casuals that serve good Asian cuisine, so we'll have to check it out. So thank you.
Please do, yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's just kind of jump into it. We talk a little bit about the franchise model, and then there's some fast casuals out there that are corporately owned, right? And so you have those two different dynamics. Talk a little bit about the supply chain and how a restaurant logistics supply chain versus a franchised focused supply chain, kind of what do they look like? And then the second question would be, how are they different?
Sure. First of all, let me kind of clarify. Some are exclusive company. There are very few, like Chipotle, for example. Most are a mix. So most restaurant companies, when you think about like a Wendy's or McDonald's or someone like that, they may be 80 to 90% franchise, and they have a 10 to 20% corporate. But most are a mix. Some of the smaller emerging concepts are all company or all franchise. But most companies kind of fall into that blend. So you're dealing with some company and some franchise.
Mostly the 80-20 rule, where mostly a franchise, or is it still dependent on the leadership of the team?
It really depends. The larger guys, very few of the larger guys are more than 20% company owned. Many are, only 5% company owned, like the Taco Bells and those folks of the world.
Gotcha.
So when you delineate between the two, there's some big differences, and I'll use an example that's very near and dear to most Coloradans' hearts, and that's In-N-Out Burger coming in. We've read a lot about it, and we hear about it, and those of us in the restaurant space know that In-N-Out, they're company owned, and they're very, very strategic when they move into a market. Mm-hmm. So they'll build the distribution center, bakery, and meat facility. And then they plant at least 10 restaurants in the near vicinity. And that's a model that's worked really well for them. And it's been very strategic, keeps their costs very low, keeps their service level very high. And then they just kind of build from there, and they go from region to region very strategically. That's a big advantage of a company-owned system that you don't see on the franchise side. In some cases, not In-N-Out, but other examples, you may have an all-company situation, but they're heavily owned by private equity.
Okay.
So that kind of, the control from private equity, whether you're franchise or whether you're company, that could be a disadvantage that could affect both different types of blends.
Mm-hmm.
On the franchise side, one of the advantages is you can grow very rapidly because you're not expending all of the cash. You're getting cash from the franchisees that are investing in their businesses, collecting royalties and what have you. So that's one advantage. A disadvantage in franchise system, and I'll use our company as an example. We may build one location in a state and then not come back and build the second location for 2 or 3 years. And those of us who work in inbound logistics and deal with LTLs and the driver shortages and capacity issues understand that that's a big challenge.
Right.
Another big challenge with franchise systems that you don't see so much in company systems is compliance. So we'll talk a little bit later about the role of our food service distributors like Cisco. And in a company system, you just tell the company operators, hey, please buy from Cisco. Here's your order guide. Place your purchases. Well, sometimes what we find in franchise-heavy systems is they want to find a deal on something and they're bargain shopping. And that creates a lot of issues, a lot of challenges, not only from a contract compliance, which may be the reason you got a favorable price, but also it could be a food safety and traceability issue with food.
Yeah. I think a franchisee may not understand the implications of finding a good deal somewhere else that could jeopardize or put the whole organization at risk. I don't think the average franchisee may not understand that.
Absolutely, it's a constant reminder and a constant conversation. And sometimes you get in the heat of battle as a business owner, and you're looking at pennies instead of dollars, and you're not considering the amount of time it takes away from your shop, going out and bargain shopping. And did that dollar that I just saved on toilet paper really impact me when it took me an hour to go of time away from the restaurant to go and do that? And if you buy food products, we have a very robust traceability program and a very robust recall program through our food service distributors. And that goes away if you buy outside of the system. So it creates a risk for the whole brand.
Gotcha. Do most people just not even allow it?
The larger, more sophisticated systems, absolutely not. They don't allow it. We've got some things in our system where we require compliance as well, and we find folks are not complying. There are obviously progressive. There's a progressive process that we take to eliminate that activity.
Yeah, interesting. So who takes the lead on developing the supply chain network and negotiating the contracts, whether that's for the cost of transportation or the cost of the goods? And when I say take the lead, is that the individual franchisor, meaning the brand name company that we knew, or is there an advisory board that gets together and makes decisions on the benefit of the organization? Who runs point to kind of set things up?
So it depends, and I'll talk about our system, and then I'll talk about some others that are very common out there. So in our system, the franchisor, we have the team. We have the resources, and we negotiate everything from the FOB cost at the manufacturer. We work with our distributor and other logistics companies and redistributors to get the product to the food service distributor, and then we negotiate what we call the last mile distribution or the last mile delivery with the food service distributor. So we manage all that at Teriyaki Madness. Some other concepts in many large restaurant concepts, they have what's called a franchise cooperative.
Okay.
So it's a separate company. Like when I worked at Wendy's, for example, we were part of the company, but shortly after I left, they went to a cooperative, which the employees of the co-op work for the franchise cooperative. It's a separate company with a president and officers, and they serve the franchisees and they serve the company themselves. And that's become a very popular model. Several of the very large companies have moved to that co-op, and it's really about the franchisees being a majority of the system, controlling their own destiny.
Right.
So it's there are advantages and disadvantages to both ways. At the end of the day, you have to have trust, transparency, and get the results. Another kind of wrinkle in this is master franchisees, and I'll give you an example from our perspective.
But let me cut you off for
Sure.
For our audience, explain what a master franchisee is versus just a regular franchisee, because I think they own an area, district, multiple locations. So let's set the stage on that first.
That's a good catch. A regular franchisee for us, for example, would be someone who buys, 1 to 10 locations, say, and they are following our franchise, the regulations that we have in the contract and the disclosure documents to the letter. A master franchise, for example, may be someone that comes in and buys a country, like we may have someone that comes in and buys Mexico. And part of the master agreement is that they're going to share in the royalties, and they're also going to share in the work. So we're actually in the process of doing that right now. We have a great partner in Mexico, and we're working together. We're following our standards for food safety, for quality, for specifications, but they're doing a lot of the work to help out, to set up the meetings and really find the suppliers and work with the distributors and what have you. So that's more of a partnership. We still have to deliver the brand standards, the food safety, and meet the expectations. But because they are a partner, both in rolling out the restaurants as well as kind of sharing in the royalties, they do share in the responsibilities and the setup as well.
Gotcha. Do you find master franchisees are more country related versus like, hey, I want these 5 states in the U.S.? Because it sounds like there needs to be a lot of tribal knowledge, if that's the right word, for here's how things operate in Egypt or Mexico or Canada. So do you see master franchisees more on a country level?
In my experience, the companies I've worked for, like Wendy's, for example, Noodles, and Teriyaki Madness, that's exactly what I've seen. A lot of Middle Eastern master franchisees and many concepts out there you see, and they provide similar type partnerships to brands. I know, our friends at Quiznos did major expansion in the Middle East years ago, and it seems to be a popular thing to do is countries that we don't necessarily understand or do business differently than what we do. We partner with people in this business, and they help us develop and open restaurants.
Gotcha. So I sidetracked you a little bit by trying to explain the master franchisee and their role, but you were going to talk a little bit about how that supply chain is a little bit different.
So on the master?
Yes. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, so it's at the end of the day, it's just it's really back to the partnership piece. So you're working together. Again, the standards are the same, and the end product and the specifications are the same. But maybe instead of like in Mexico, for example, there's a Cisco partner called Pacific Star Foods that's a joint venture. So we're using a non-approved distributor, but they're really approved because they've met all of our standards. Our franchise partner has endorsed them and what have you. And at the end of the day, we're going to get the same results we would with our preferred partner. Another change that we've agreed upon as a partnership that we would never do in the U.S. because of labor issues. We have huge labor shortages here, similar to the driver shortages. Is we're going to make a lot of our products. Again, to meet our final recipe, exactly like in the U.S., but we're going to make them from scratch in Mexico. And the reason we're doing it is labor is plentiful and less expensive, and we can deliver a product that we're very proud to serve there and meet the economic model of the master franchisee.
Huh. So when you say make it from scratch, what does that mean? Like the kitchen there does more prep work, or dive into that a little bit more when you say make it from scratch.
So we have some items that are made by co-packers in the U.S.
Okay.
And we would just make those all. We would buy all the sub-ingredients through the food service distributor and actually make them in-house. Like, for example, egg rolls, very, very labor intensive. And we've reverse engineered the recipe so that we can make them from the raw ingredients, roll them in-house. There's a multi-step process of frying, freezing, storing, and then cooking again. That right now is done with co-packers in the U.S.
Right. Very,
very labor intensive, but in Mexico we're able to make it work, and actually works out better for the economic model.
Gotcha. You made reference to a company, Cisco, and obviously there's a few others that the average consumer may see backed up to a Starbucks or a Teriyaki Madness or something that would be like Cisco. U.S. Foods, Performance Food Groups. Talk about who are those companies and how do they relate in the supply chain to get product and food to the store?
Sure. So those are we call those food service distributors or broadline distributors,
Okay.
and what they really do, and what's one of the things unique about the restaurant business than a lot of others is, we're not buying our food directly from the manufacturers. The grocery industry is kind of similar, different set of food distributors, but they're consolidating and they're bringing in large quantities, so they're bringing inbound product in at a very affordable price, and then they're releasing orders to us 2 to 3 times a week based upon our needs.
Okay.
So instead of us having huge warehouses or huge storage facilities, we're getting groceries that last us the next 3 or 4 days. So they're providing it's called a last mile distribution or last mile logistics. That's what they provide to us, and it goes even further. I mean, you can look at a surface level relationship with a Cisco or U.S. Foods or PFG, and say, hey, I'm just buying stuff from them, and they're just giving me groceries. Or you can do like we've done, and a lot of other chain restaurants that have been successful, and really partner with them. Mm-hmm. And that's going all the way back and saying, okay, let's work together on buying even all the way back to the manufacturer or the farm the best we can, because the FOB cost, as everybody in this audience knows, is only a fraction of the cost. So we have the FOB, we have the inbound freight to the food service distributor, and then we have that last mile distribution, and those costs can be very significant, especially a concept like ours, the way we're growing, one restaurant in one region at a time versus in clusters like the In-N-Out example. So, so we've used them to partner all the way back, all the way up the supply chain, not just managing deliveries to our locations. And they've helped us reduce our inbound cost and then our cost to the restaurants fairly significantly.
Yeah. So who would own the inventory, so to speak? So we'll just use an example of you want to follow the supply chain all the way to the farm, right? So let's say you're buying chicken for your product. Who owns that chicken? Are you saying I'll pay you $1 per pound and that includes getting it to my door? Or, hey, we're going to buy it for 70 cents at the farm and we're going to carry the inventory and help manage it through the flow? How does that work? And maybe it's different on the scale of the restaurant.
Yeah, so it's it like every other answer I've given so far, it depends, right? So we have stock items that we buy from distributors, and the distributor owns that inventory. They own the financial risk of that inventory, and they sell to us. Sometimes at a negotiated price, sometimes it's at their stock price. We've been very fortunate with Cisco to negotiate a lot of deals on their stock products to keep our costs low. So an example for us is we use a lot of fresh chicken. Our restaurants for deboned fresh thigh meat, about 40,000 pounds per year per location. We're bringing in fresh thigh meat, and we don't have the density to contract that with Cisco or with the manufacturer all the way back, but we've worked with them and partnered with them. So they're saying, hey, we're bringing it in anyway. We're going to add your volume to that, and by the way, we're going to tag you onto our contract, which is well below market. So that's kind of the stock products. Then we have several proprietary products, and those work a little different. So we have, and I hope everybody in the audience goes to our restaurant and tries it. But we have probably the best yakisoba noodle that's out there, and we contract directly with the manufacturer. It's our spec product. And we work with them and Cisco to get the product to the OpCos, the different Cisco centers, and then obviously negotiate the last mile. And that we're responsible for all the way through. We have to provide projections and usage, and as we build new locations, we have to let everybody know in the chain, so they increase production, inventory, et cetera. So for us, one of the blessings that we've had is in order to grow like we've grown, we've been fortunate that we have very few of those proprietary items, and we do a lot of work in the back of the kitchen on those stock items. So that helps us as well. That helps aid in the in building the costs, similar costs, even though we're building only one restaurant at a time in different regions.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Empower the local franchisee and literally the people in the kitchen to add the spices to make it exactly the way you want it, and just carry the stock item all the way to the store. So
Absolutely.
that makes a lot of sense. Now, partnership, there's a partnership with all types of relationships out there, but in what you're describing, partnership needs to be paramount. You talked about the transparency, so you talked a little bit about being a good customer to your suppliers. So talk a little bit about the importance in that.
Yeah, so for us, and for I think any restaurant company in today's today's environment, it's more critical than ever. I remember in the old days, you would talk to the person in charge of distribution when I worked for some of the bigger companies, and they'd say, a relationship with a lot of friction with your distributor is good because we don't want them to be taking advantage of us.
Sure.
Well, those times have changed, and we've got now, as we've talked about, inbound driver shortages. We also have those same issues with the last mile delivery drivers. They have to be CDL drivers as well. And not only that, but we have a huge we have a huge issue with capacity. Several years ago, U.S. Foods and Cisco tried to merge, and they did that a couple of times, and it took many years. And during that time, both Cisco and U.S. Foods and a lot of the other distributors said, let's wait and see what the government does to split up these companies. Well, because the merger didn't happen twice, we had several years of no building capacity, and you see that many more restaurants have come on board. So it's really important to be a good customer because, one, there's really not a lot of options. The days of the restaurants beating up the food service distributors and taking advantage of them and beating them down for costs and concessions don't work anymore. You have to be a partner. You have to really take out structural costs together. You have to do things to help the distributor. And we tell our franchisees, it's like, your employees make mistakes all the time, and just be cognizant of that and be a good partner, like you would like your customer to be a partner of yours. So we tell our franchisees, for example, don't eat off the truck. And that's so for example,
tell me what that means.
So let's say you have a Tuesday, Thursday delivery for your groceries, and your delivery on Thursday is scheduled at 11 a.m. Well, don't plan to run out of food at noon, because you give yourself no opportunity. You give a very complex supply chain no opportunity for mistakes. And, furthermore, let's say that the night before a busload of little leaguers come in and just take everything else you've got. You want to be able to not lose that sale. So being a good customer means a lot of things, working with them, partnering, taking out structural costs, but it also means, hey, you know what? I had enough room to hold another revenue period worth of groceries. I understand that there's snow and ice on the road and you have a complex, hard job, so I'm going to help you out by helping myself out. And it just creates a better environment.
Yeah, obviously that's important to Teriyaki Madness. Do you think that's a trend in the food service as a whole, that everybody's gets it? Driver shortages are real, and it impacts the ability for me to get my food. Are more companies embracing that idea?
I think they are, Doug. We hear a lot from the distributor side, and I hear from my peers about distribution companies, food service distributors. They're selectively firing customers that aren't profitable or who don't work with them. So that's happening more and more than I've ever seen. And I've got peers in the industry that will call me up and say, hey, I just got a notice from XYZ distributor, and in 6 months we're done. And I don't know who to go to because there's no capacity. And I start giving them advice if they want it about what to do. And I got to tell you, I don't want to be in that position in this marketplace right now. There's just not a lot of options, and you really have to treat people well and give them an opportunity to be successful.
Yeah, that's the golden rule, right? Treat people the way you'd want to be treated.
I hope so, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good. So we only have a few minutes here left, but what would be one or two challenges that you'd have, or opportunities, I should say, in the supply chain as you're evolving Teriyaki Madness?
Yeah, so probably our biggest challenge in the supply chain is our minimums for our proprietary items. So we talked about the mix between proprietary and DC stock items. And, you build one restaurant in Anchorage, Alaska, for example, which we don't have one. I'm just a hypothetical. And, even though we have a handful of proprietary items, it's really, if you think about it, it's getting the product there as cost effectively as possible, one. Number two, not burdening your distributor, back to the partnership piece, with carrying a bunch of slots of proprietary inventory that move very, very slowly. So that's the biggest challenge. I think with our growth plans that we have, that it will correct itself over time. But I understand the challenge when I see those very, very remote locations come up and there's only one there.
Yeah.
And I think about the in-and-out model we talked about and think, wow, wouldn't it be a luxury to have a situation like that instead of this? But we'll overcome, and and we always get through it.
Yeah, good. Well, obviously there's good leadership over at Teriyaki Madness. I'm sure you guys will do a tremendous job, and I'd encourage everybody to head down to I-25 and Arapahoe and out in Lakewood and go from there. So we'll have to have you on again to talk a little bit more about the supply chain, but I think our audience has learned quite a bit, and I want to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Doug. It's been a pleasure.
And again, thank you for listening to the Connect and Collaborate Network featuring Supply Chain Logistics, the Storytellers, brought to you by CAP Logistics. Thanks again.